The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Josh Hunsinger. I am the Placer County Agricultural Commissioner and Sealer of Weights and Measures. With me today are Matt Seiberling, CACASA's legislative advocate, as well as Jim Allen, who is the Solano County Commissioner Sealer and also the incoming chair of the CACASA Legislative Committee. This is the latest in our series of webinars, which are intended to help Deputy and Commissioner Sealer candidates prepare for their oral exams. The disclaimer that I will give everyone, just like I have for all the past ones, is these webinars are not meant to directly give you answers to exam questions, but rather to fill you in on basic core knowledge that anybody at a deputy or commissioner sealer level should have. So this is just base knowledge from which you can build answers, but it is not direct answers to exam questions. So that was a little bit of a confusion I've heard from some folks. They were disappointed when the webinars didn't directly give them the answers to questions on the last exam cycles. So we are planning to have this webinar. We'll do a presentation and then we'll open it up after the presentation to questions. The way we do that is we keep everybody muted because we have so many participants. And so there should be a questions tab down on towards the bottom of your control panel. Go ahead and type out your questions, and when we go to the question and answer time, I will read the questions and the panelists will then answer your questions. So that's worked pretty well in the past. So again, at any point that you have questions, go ahead and type them in and then we'll address them all at the end. As a reminder as well, we are recording this broadcast and we'll have it posted to YouTube hopefully today. There is a CACASA YouTube channel where you can go view all of the past presentations. If you just go to YouTube and type in CACASA exam training, it should come up with the CACASA logo, and that's the correct YouTube channel. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Seiberling and Jim Allen.
This is Jim Allen. I'll go ahead and go first. You want to just say hi, Matt?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Hello, everybody. Thanks for attending. Hopefully, I can answer all your questions. And if you stump me, then I will definitely do my best to answer it.
So on the first slide, you see my information there at the top, and then Louis Mendoza's. It's a little unusual in that we're splitting the normal two-year term of being the legislative chair, but that's because I was president of CACASA last year, and I had been leg chair before that, and so I'll be returning to that position at the end of this year. And you see Matt there, who's our lobbyist, and has done a good job for us for some time. So can we move to the next slide? So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to go over the Legislative Committee's authority, which is in the CACASA bylaws, and also some policy and guidelines that are assigned to the Legislative Committee's work by CACASA. We'll go over the CACASA process for proposed bills and the way that we take positions on bills. Then we'll turn it over to Matt and we'll go over the legislative process. And this is basically where we advocate those positions that we've taken or where we try to get our sponsored legislation enacted. And at the end, we'll take questions and answers and try to be responsive to those in the time allowed. So the CACASA bylaws make the Legislative Committee one of the standing committees of CACASA. It's differentiated from the ad hoc committees and interim committees that we sometimes have. And the chairperson, as I said earlier, is a two-year appointment, which is synchronous with the state legislative cycle. But in this case, we're splitting it just because I was president last year. The president shall appoint the chairperson by September 1st. And the regional association shall appoint at least one, but not more than 3 of their members to the committee. The committee shall keep current with legislation and shall maintain a close liaison with CDFA, CDPR, the board of directors, and the association committees. And I think this is a very important point. We work in harmony with our state partners to the degree possible. Almost all of our positions are approved directly by the board of directors, and sometimes they're forwarded to us from the association committees. That will perform our duties consistent with association policy, and will recommend that any new legislation that's needed and participate in the promotion and development of beneficial legislation and oppose legislation which is not beneficial. In the policy and guidelines of the association, the purpose of the legislative committee is to review proposed legislation affecting the association, its members, the industries, and the public we serve, craft language for legislation sought by the association, and recommend positions on legislation of interest to the association, and represent the association as necessary in legislative matters. And I think at this point, one thing I'd like to say is that when it comes to rulemaking, the regulatory process, that's often the comments on those regulations are often made by the committees directly, not necessarily going through the legislative committee. And at some point or another, we'll probably go over the difference between a law and a regulation later in the program. But I think that that's important to recognize, that if there's, say, pesticide policy that's being proposed as a regulation by DPR, that would usually, the PRAC committee would usually take the position and then get validation by the board of directors without moving through ledge. Continuing the policy and guidelines, the committee shall limit its positions and legislative activities to those bills which affect members by promoting beneficial legislation and opposing that legislation which is not beneficial. And the committee may be comprised of subcommittees for agricultural legislation and or a subcommittee for weights and measures legislation or other subcommittee designations as appropriate to the needs of the committee. Probably the most recent example of this is our direct marketing subcommittee that we had as the direct marketing law was rewritten. And that finished. We ended that committee last year. The responsibilities of the legislative committee, and in particular its chair, are authorized to speak on behalf of the association in all legislative matters in their respective programs when the board of directors or executive board cannot readily act and develop an association position. This is an important responsibility, actually. It's essential that we be very nimble at certain times and responsive, because a lot of times there's just no time to act through the board of directors and get validation of our opinions or our positions. The association's contact Matt Seiverling. I'm getting an echo. I don't know if I'm not sure what's going on, but anyway. The association's contact Matt Seiverling for bills on which it takes a position will be the chairperson.
Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the times when Matt will call a particular commissioner with a particular expertise on an issue?
I can if you want, Jim.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, man, I'm on the line. So, I mean, just for starters, I mean, the slides that we're going through here and sort of the way that it's being described is, it's helpful. It gets things done. It sets up a process, as Jim said, for he and I, or in past years, Louis and I, or years even before that, Frank Carl and I, to react to things that are needing immediate attention. A draft of amendments or something that's going to be heard the next day or the next week. There's a process for us to adequately respond to that. But in addition to that, as Josh was asking, California is a insanely diverse place, and you have very urban areas, you have very agricultural areas, rural areas that are each going to have expertise based on the background of that commissioner, the experience of that commissioner, and there will be oftentimes, and the ones that jump out to me, of course, are going to be Los Angeles issues, where I work directly with people who aren't the chair, like Kurt Florin in LA, Bob Atkins prior in San Diego, on urban type issues to get their specific expertise and knowledge and background on an issue for me to communicate that at the Capitol to members who represent those counties. So it's, for the most part, the bylaws direct me to work directly with the chair, but there will be many times when I'm reaching out to members who, agricultural commissioners and sealers who represent areas who happen to have a chair of a committee that also represents that area, to get specific background information that helps me deliver our message in a much more effective way.
Yeah, I think when you say that, authority to speak on behalf of the association on legislative matters, that's a fairly regular occurrence that, on a drop of a hat, somebody has to respond and get information or even testify down at the legislature. So I think that was important. I wanted to make sure that was emphasized.
One of the things that we've had for the last couple of years that's given us a little more latitude there is the platform positions as well. And so a lot of times we can find guidance in the platform that, we feel pretty empowered to go ahead and advocate the association's position without having to check back with the association because we've already taken those general platform positions.
Right. Yeah, it's a very, very helpful document, and it's also it's a living document, which means it can be changed and amended and adjusted throughout the years as things change. But for the most part, it's very, very helpful in guiding our decisions.
And I think one thing that I'd add at this point is that going forward, we haven't had a lot of experience in working with our new executive director. But I think that there will be times when the executive director may speak for the association on behalf of the association in a committee or subcommittee meeting. And I would see that happening perhaps when it's a controversial issue and the commissioner whose county the issue is happening in doesn't really want to be the lightning rod for that issue that we would have. And we've got now a professional working for the association who can advocate the association's position without having that personal interest. Can we go to the next slide, or?
Yeah, sorry.
So these are basically Matt Seiverling's responsibilities as our legislative contact. And Matt is a licensed registered lobbyist with the state of California. But if appropriate, he'll work closely with CDFA and CDPR legislative representatives to carry bills and make all arrangements for which any action will support the association's position. And, there's times when our state partners actually can't advocate for a position that they otherwise might support. And in those cases, we may speak in a way that kind of advances the position of all of us. It's just sort of a political barrier. Sometimes they're not allowed to advocate at certain points in the legislative process. And then the action is coordinated with the chair along with the legislative representative or the departmental legislative representatives. And necessary actions of Matt's might include appearing and or testifying at legislative hearings, communicating with legislators and their staff, industry groups, state departments, as well as seeking assistance from other members. Were you supposed to run these slides, Matt?
It sounds like something I should talk about.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, it's you're kind of laid out there. I for the most part, except for the instances when we talked about before for major issues, major controversial bills where, I may call upon Jim to attend the hearing with me and then, and go up and testify on behalf of CACASA with me sitting next to him. For every other bill, I'm the one that's testifying. I'm the one that's lobbying the bill prior to the committee, for the week or two prior, once the bill is set for hearing, talking to all the members and staff who are deciding on how to vote on that bill and communicating CACASA's position, explaining why we either support, oppose, or need amendments on a bill. And as it says here, I'll work with other industry groups, other lobbyists who represent certain commodities that might be affected by any particular bill, other pesticide groups, Farm Bureau, et cetera, and the State Department, CDFA, DPR. If there's input I need from them, and again, if they need a message carried across the streets of the Capitol that they can't necessarily communicate due to restraints on their ability to speak on a bill, I'll oftentimes deliver their message for them in a careful way from CACASA to make sure that message is delivered. And of course, anytime I do anything on behalf of the association, I make sure that the chair, in this case it would be Jim for the next couple of years, is fully aware of what I'm doing, is apprised of all the outcomes of all bills, all hearings, all votes, and any potential follow-up that needs to be done, just so he's completely in the loop to deliver that news to the rest of the association. Move over.
So the next bullet is, that the members should support in accordance with association policy, the position adopted by the association insofar as it's not in conflict with their official county policy or position. And although the association's position does not prevent individual members from supporting an opposing position, the chair should be informed of any opposed position and the reason. And there's another thing that I don't think we have this on a slide, but I'd like to bring it up at this point, that sometimes we will ask individual members of CACASA or the whole membership to go to their boards of supervisors and seek county positions on a certain piece of legislation. And once we have enough counties on board with either a support or opposed position to that piece of legislation, we will go to CSAC or RCRC, which are statewide county advocacy groups. RCRC is for the Rural County Caucus, and CSAC is statewide for all of the counties. And we have done this in the past. There was a water meter bill that we opposed a couple of years ago, and Matt actually helped us with talking points so that each commissioner could go to his own board of supervisors, advocate that they take an opposed position to that bill. When we had sort of a critical mass of counties taking those opposed positions, we got CSAC to take an opposed position, and that process, that sort of groundswell, was really important to getting that bill killed. I'm ready for the next slide, too.
I think you covered that.
So the positions that the association can take are classified as follows: support, oppose, watch, supportive if amended, or oppose unless amended, and neutral. And I think those are pretty self-explanatory.
And Jim,
I don't know if you want to add it.
Those are standard. Those are standard terms that any lobbying group you would use the same terminology there. Is that correct?
That's correct. It is these are the most common positions.
I think, if it would be good for the people listening to this call to go to the ledge.com website, and if you look at almost any individual bill, when you look in the digest of that bill, you'll see the comments made by different industry groups, different associations, and usually they're of the same nature as these positions here. So these are the members of the current legislative committee. It's showing me as chair, Bobby Wilhite as secretary, Kurt Florin, Louis Mendoza, Josh, Dave Robinson, Tony Liniger, Joe Davini, Rick Rolla, Chuck Morris, Joe Morio, Eric Lauritsen. Connie Valenzuela just retired, so we'll need another person from the South, and Ruben Arroyo. New active members should not be confirmed as members of the Legislative Committee until they've completed at least a year of membership in CACASA. I think the important thing here is that this committee makeup does reflect the policy to have at least 2 people from each of the area groups. Now, you want to take this one, Matt?
Sure. So this is probably going to be a question, anyways, that we were going to receive after the webinar here. So I'll try and explain this best I can. So how do you start a bill? And there's a lot of different ways that an idea can make its way into a law. But the way that it most commonly happens here are listed out here through these bullets. The first one, our existing laws need to be changed or updated. Device registration fees is our example. So we have, in this association, obviously, as you all know, that the agriculture commissioner side and the county sealer voice and measure side. Device registration fees are something that are locked into existing statute. They're all capped. All the fees are capped for that purpose, for inspecting and registering the commercial weighing and measuring devices throughout the state. And as a result of that, over time, we'll build in what's called a sunset to those caps and revisit the existing fees to make sure that your costs are being adequately covered. With inflation and with years going by, these fee caps become inadequate over time, and we have to come back periodically and negotiate increases to those fee caps to make sure that we aren't bleeding too badly by performing this work and being capped at a certain rate. This is actually sunsetting at the end of 2018, so in 2 years. So we're probably going to be introducing a bill this year to start the process, negotiating with a litany of groups that have commercial weighing and measuring devices out there, and looking at each of those in a vacuum and making sure that each of them are at an adequate fee cap to recover your costs. Beyond that, the deputy area groups in CACASA, individual regions and counties might have specific issues that percolate up to the association level and are adopted for general sponsorship by the association. Even though it might have started as a problem that was only found in a county or 2 or in a region, it might get recognized as a problem that could be of statewide importance, and rather than having the county or that region sponsor a bill, the association might take it upon itself to move forward, introduce a bill, and move it through the process to change that law to benefit everybody all at once. We are often approached by the industry on the next bullet to carry bills. I know structural pest control has over the years approached us to add more and more counties into a fee program to increase presence in those counties to do more inspections of structural pest control. And over the years, again, we've added counties here and there to make that program grow larger. That's one that comes to mind from the industry. Legislatures, state partners, and local jurisdictions, same thing. I mean, these things start small and they percolate up to the top. They make their way through certain members that are presented in bill form to our association, and we can, again, go across the street and find a member who cares enough about it to introduce that into a bill and try and move it through and change that law. I think the next slide is actually more of a ledge process. Yeah. Do you want to cover this one, Jim?
Sure. And before I leave the last one, I guess we're on the new slide now, but one of the things that we often do is within the association in preparing for a piece of legislation is to do a survey. And with device registration fees in particular, Josh Hunsinger has run the survey for us the last couple of times. we survey which counties are at the statutory limit for the fees and what the actual costs to those counties are. And then when we work with committee staff on the sunset bill, we have good evidence that we either need to maintain or increase the fees. And that evidence is important to moving the legislation along. So how do we start a bill? What ideas or concepts address a need? The proposed ideas or concepts for legislation are moved through CACASA through the appropriate committees and then discussed at the legislative committee. So if it was a pesticide issue, it would in all likelihood start in PREC. Or if it was a pest exclusion issue, it would probably start in pest prevention and then be referred. The idea would be referred to the Leg Committee, discussed. We'd get the concurrence of the CACASA Board of Directors or direction provided by the Board of Directors. And then we would provide Matt that direction, and he would try to seek an author for the bill.
Okay, so I'll try and make this as interesting as I can. I know most of us learned how this process works back in high school, or maybe even before. But just as a starter, I know I keep saying going across the street and introducing a bill and all this. Just to sort of frame how important that is. The only way that a bill gets introduced and actually starts moving through the process is if a member of the legislature, and there's 80 members in the Assembly and 40 in the Senate, takes it upon themselves to agree to author a bill. So the first part of the session, which actually begins in January, actually they're swearing into December this year, and then they start the session in January. Lobbyists like myself and other interest groups like CACASA will begin approaching appropriate members. You know, if it's an urban issue, you'll approach an urban member. If it's a rural issue, it'll be a rural member. Or you know something about the background of that member that translates well to the bill you want to carry. You'll start basically approaching them, explaining the issue that you're trying to fix through your bill, and start beginning to find someone who cares enough about that issue and agrees with you enough to dedicate their time, resources, and staff to promoting that bill, putting their name on it, introducing it as a piece of legislation that takes on a bill number and its own identity, and then basically carrying that through the process. And it's no small task to get a bill from introduction all the way to signature. You know, it takes many, many hours of work. It takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, and you know, these members also have bill limits that prevent them from introducing an infinite amount of bills. So it's kind of a competitive approach as well when you're looking for a member that has room, has interest, and has the tenacity to get your bill through. So it's kind of starting at the top. The bill is introduced, which is no small task. You know, it's kind of your first victory is getting the bill introduced at all. The bill is then referred to committees, and CACASA generally works within a handful of committees. You guys do have the county sealer side and the agricultural commissioner side, so you will get into agriculture committees, environmental safety committees for most of those issues. On your weights and measures side, most of those will go to you know, consumer protection types of committees, business and professions types of committees. So you actually get sort of spread out, and you aren't really focused specifically on one committee every single time. So you have to kind of get to know a lot of staff and a lot of members across the street based on the fact that your bills that you care about will be referred to a number of different committees. If the bill is successful on getting through a committee, which requires a majority vote of those sitting on that committee, the bill does go to the floor in the House that it was introduced. So if it's an Assembly bill, it'll go to the Assembly floor. If it's a Senate bill, it'll go to the Senate floor, where it will be faced with a vote of those members that sit in those houses. The Senate requires 21 votes to pass. The Assembly requires 41 votes to pass. And once it is successful in clearing the Assembly committee or the Senate committee, depending on where it's introduced, and then that respective floor, it then switches houses and starts the whole process over again. in the opposite house's policy committee, and then through that opposite house floor as well. So you can see now, again, kind of backing up all the way to where I started, when you're approaching a member to carry a bill, knowing the journey that bill has to go through, all the different votes, all the different analyses, all the different negotiations of the controversial bill, such as the vice registration bill that's going to affect dozens of different industry groups, members really have to decide whether or not they're going to want to ride with you through that journey. It's a very, very rigorous and intensive process. Once the bill does clear both houses, all the committees and floor votes in each of those houses, if it was amended, it goes back to the original house of origin for a concurrence vote on the floor. They basically look at the amendments that the other house inserted into that bill, decide whether or not they're acceptable, and if they vote the bill again off that floor, it then goes to the governor for his consideration. He recently just finished up his work this year on September 30th of all the bills that he received from the last legislative session, and then he decides whether or not he wants to sign or veto it. This governor this year vetoed about 15% of the bills that he received, so not a terribly high number, but a little high for this particular governor. I know prior governors vetoed anywhere from a quarter to a third of what they received. But ultimately, the governor has an up or down vote on that bill after it's gone through the entire process. His decision is whether or not to let that through. Unlike the federal government, the governor at the state level doesn't have line item veto authority, so he or she cannot sign a portion of the bill and veto a portion of the bill. It's either the entire thing is up or down. So they basically have to take the bill for what it is. He can't amend it. He has to just either sign it or veto it. And in most cases, depending on whether or not it's an urgency bill, the bill becomes law on January 1st of the next year after he signs it. So hopefully the sausage making process is something that is familiar to some of you. I know it's a little dry, but for those of you who work on ledge, it can be interesting and kind of a lot of fun at the same time.
Yeah, it's a lot of times it isn't primary color flow chart. You're working in the gray areas between committee staff members a lot of times. One of the things that's not on the flow chart is that the governor sometimes has either a signing message or a veto message. And we've been impacted by those in the past. Sometimes the governor, fairly recently, he vetoed a bill that we had opposed, but he directed us to work with industry to affect the solution that industry was working on. And right. that type of direction is really very important, because if you fail to act on that, it means he'll sign it next time probably. So I think we're probably ready for questions, right?
Well, one other thing I wanted to throw in there is just, Jim, you had mentioned the website where folks can go and look at all the bills as they're going through the process, but I'm not sure if that was really emphasized, and I don't see it in the presentation. Matt, do you want to cover that a little bit? Yeah, sure. So the best one that I've found that's not a subscription service is www.leginfo, leginfo.ca.gov. And on that site, you can find any active bill by bill number, by author, by keyword, and within that site as well, you can read the language of any bill, the amendments to any bill, the analysis to any bill, prior analyses that are on file there, the vote counts for any bill, and also the calendar for any bill. So basically, if a bill has a hearing coming up, it'll be listed there, as with the date, the time, and the room number, and which committee it's being heard in. Additionally, a resource that I use here in my office, if I want to monitor a hearing, if I'm not actually at the hearing, calchannel.com, CAL channel.com, which is the California channel. They televise a lot of hearings in the bigger committee rooms.
So if you're aware that a hearing is coming up and you want to watch it yourself, you want to see how it goes, you want to hear the discussion, rather than read a recap, you can watch it live. That's an available resource as well. Additionally, what's gotten a lot better since I started, I've been doing this for 13 years now. They've gotten very good on the senate.ca.gov and assembly.ca.gov in televising their own hearings. That's something they used to not do before. And what's best about those two sites, if you can't find the hearing on the Cal Channel website, I know the Assembly and the Senate also have audio links. All the rooms are wired with sound at least. Most of them have cameras, but some of them are only wired with audio. So if you want to listen into a hearing that's not being televised, you can find it either at the Senate or the Assembly website, depending on whose committee hearing it is. So all those are very useful if you give the time and interest to track that stuff.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, that leginfo.ca.gov is pretty handy. If you just know, AB 1234 deals with farmers markets, you can just go to bill info, type in 1234 and click search, and it'll come up with that, and then it'll take you into everything you ever wanted to know about the entire bill, its history and votes and analysis and everything. So that's really a great resource. Leginfo also has all of the state law, so that's a easy way to access, like the Food and Ag Code, for instance, or Business and Professions Code if you're wanting to look those up. It looks like right now I only have one question, so let me read that, and then if there's more questions, please enter them. Just type them out to me, and I will read them off, and we'll answer them for you. So first question is it legal to work directly with committee representatives to gain support for a bill?
Committee representatives, legislators?
I assume so.
Yes, it's that's my job. My job is to work directly with members or their staff to deliver arguments and information that persuade them to vote the way we want them to.
Do you want to talk about staff a little bit? There's local district office staff, and then
Right.
There's Capitol staff, and there's Capitol staff that specialize in certain issues sometimes.
Right. So yeah. I mean, just to recap, there's a couple different job functions across the street at the Capitol that we have to sort of use in different ways to get our point across. So as Josh said, every member in the legislature, depending on the rank of that member and the position they have within their party, has staff. Obviously, the Speaker and the Pro Tem in the Assembly and the Senate have dozens of staff members. They have chiefs of staff, deputies, policy staff that are assigned to specific areas. Other chairs of committees have personal staff that that basically meet, for the most part, with lobbyists and constituents that come in to deliver messages to that committee chair or that committee member, and helps their boss vote, depending on what kind of benefits them the most, depending on where they're from. Additionally, the committees themselves have staff, technically who work for the chairs of that committee, but the chairs can change from year to year, but the committee staff for the most part stays with that committee. So if you acquire the chairmanship of the Assembly Agriculture Committee, you will begin working with a guy by the name of Jim Collins, who's been in that position for well over 25 years. And has probably worked with dozens of different members who have come through and been the chair of the Agriculture Committee. So it's important for us and for me especially to form relationships with people like Jim, who are going to be doing the analyses of the bill that are being heard in that committee, and helping the members sort of decide how they want to vote prior to a committee hearing. And then lastly, probably more important and most important to you folks, every member will also have district staff. So they'll have a district office back where they're at. Some members have multiple district offices depending on the size of their district. And those are staffed by people who presumably live there, who are close to the constituents, and who receive a lot of kind of finger on the pulse type of information that they then pass on to their member up here in Sacramento. And a lot of times, the members that don't live anywhere in this area will go home, down to the Southern California or the outer reaches of the state Thursday night, and then they'll spend Friday in the district, either at one of the district offices or around their district, gathering information, hearing from their constituents, hosting events, having coffee with people, etc. And it's been a very effective way to get our message across, working on all of those levels and all those fronts, doing our work here in Sacramento, but then when we have the time and the opportunity to also meet with these folks on a more casual basis down in their districts, face-to-face, and sort of communicating our points across that match the ones up here in Sacramento at the same time.
Thanks, Matt. I do not see any other questions. I'll give it another minute here, but unless anyone has any other questions, I think that will conclude the webinar. So let's just give it another minute or so here, just in case. But this has been very, very enlightening and helpful. I know there's those exams do commonly have questions about the legislative process. It's something, as I've become a commissioner, I've definitely had to learn about and become involved in. I've gotten to go down to the Capitol a few times and sat in committee meetings with Matt and spoken to a committee on a couple of different occasions, and it's been a great thing, a really neat thing to participate in our process of developing state law. So hopefully many of the folks on the phone call will get to experience that at some point in their career as well. I'm not seeing any other questions. So with that, and Matt or Jim, you have any last minute comments you want to make, or we can conclude the webinar?
Well, I just think that I'd like to say, as chair of the Ledge Committee, it's good to have every member of CACASA have a personal relationship with their assembly members and their senator, because you're the subject matter expert in their district that they will go to fact check things that we are proposing through legislation or opposing through legislation. And I think it's something that new commissioners need to cultivate those relationships as quickly as possible. And and as Josh just said, it's a very rewarding thing to work with, and we've been, I think, extremely successful for the last several years in CACASA, both in our proposed legislation and, unfortunately, it's been necessary for us to work to kill some adversarial bills, and we've been successful. We've been pretty successful at getting that done as well. So I thank you for giving me the time to talk about this, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to everyone who participated. As I mentioned, I will try to send out an email as soon as I get it posted on YouTube with the link to everyone who registered. And I will go ahead and send out a copy of this PowerPoint presentation to everyone as well. So stay tuned for an email from me, hopefully later today or early next week. And with that, we will conclude the webinar. Thanks so much.